I wasn't supposed to linger that morning. Just coffee in and out. The kind of routine that doesn't deserve remembering. But I saw her again. She was already there when I pushed open the glass door, sitting by the window with her jacket folded neatly on the chair beside her. My brother's wife. Technically my sister-in-law. But that word had always felt too stiff, too formal for her. She looked too alive for something that sounded like paperwork. I joined a short line. She didn't notice me at first, her eyes moving over the screen of her phone, thumb resting against her lip in that absent way people do when they're thinking too hard. Then, just as the barista asked for my order, she glanced up. Her eyes caught mine, held them for just a breath too long. "Morning," she said. Soft, like it wasn't meant to carry. I nodded back, probably too quickly. "Morning." I ordered the same thing as always, though I couldn't shake the feeling she remembered. 2 pumps vanilla, light foam. She was the kind of person who filed away details like that. At least that's how it felt whenever she asked how classes were going or mentioned a book I'd said I liked once in passing. When I got my cup, I should have left. That had been the plan. Instead, I slid into the empty chair across from her. "You're early," I said. My voice sounded casual, but my hand tightened on the cardboard sleeve. She smiled, a quick curve at the corner of her mouth. "Couldn't sleep. Thought coffee might help." There was a pause then, the kind where you notice every small sound around you. The hiss of milk steaming, the hum of traffic outside, the scrape of her spoon against ceramic as she stirred. She didn't fill the silence, and neither did I. Somehow, that made it heavier. I looked down, tracing the edge of my napkin with one finger. It came away folded, then folded again until it was nothing but a thin strip. When I glanced up, she was watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Not amusement, not pity. Something quieter. "You still writing?" she asked. I blinked. "What? Stories. You used to mention them." She lifted her cup, hiding half her face in the steam. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not much lately." "Busy." I shrugged. The real answer was that the words never came when I sat alone at night with the screen glowing in front of me. But I didn't know how to explain that without sounding foolish. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the name, then flipped it over without answering. That small act, ignoring whoever it was, felt like a secret she hadn't meant to share. I should have asked about my brother then, or her work, or anything safe. But instead, I just said, "Coffee's on me next time." Her lips pressed together, not quite a smile. She tilted her head, studying me in that way that made my chest feel tight. "Next time," she repeated. "Yeah," I said, trying to make it sound light. "If there is one." She didn't answer, just held my gaze until the moment stretched too thin. Then she gathered her jacket, slipped it over her shoulders, and stood. "Take care of yourself," she said. Not goodbye, not see you soon. Just that. I watched her leave, my coffee cooling untouched in front of me. A few minutes later, as I finally stepped outside, my phone buzzed. One new message. From her. "Don't mention this to your brother." And just like that, the air felt different, heavier. I didn't answer her text that day. I just stared at it, my thumb hovering above the screen, typing 3 dots, then erasing them, over and over. "Don't mention this to your brother." The words felt sharper than they should have. Not dangerous, exactly, but heavy, like stepping onto a bridge you're not sure will hold. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It never really was. I was coming back from class, balancing a bag of groceries, when I spotted her car in the driveway. My brother wasn't home. His job kept him late most nights, and the house felt too still when I stepped inside. She was in the kitchen, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back loosely. She glanced up from the sink and smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. "You're early," she said. "You always say that." I answered before I thought. Her smile deepened, a little amused. "Maybe you just keep surprising me." I set the groceries on the counter. For a while, the only sound was the rhythm of running water and the soft clink of dishes. I busied myself unpacking, though I kept catching glimpses of her hands moving in the sink. Slim wrists, the ring glinting faintly. "Want some tea?" she asked after a beat. I nodded, though I wasn't sure why. She poured 2 mugs and set one in front of me. The steam curled upward, carrying that faint, calming scent of mint. We sat across from each other, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. "Out of nowhere," she said, I used to come here after night shifts. This kitchen. She glanced around, as if measuring the space. Your brother and I weren't married yet. I'd be exhausted, but he'd leave the light on for me. Just a little thing, but I never forgot it. I looked at her, trying to picture it. Her younger, tired, walking into the same room where I was now sitting. The thought pressed something strange into my chest. That was a long time ago, she added quickly, as if she'd said too much. I wanted to ask what changed, why her voice sounded heavier when she said it, but the words stuck. Instead, I traced the rim of my cup with a fingertip. You still can't sleep? I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down to the tea. Not really. I thought about her text again, about the way she'd ignored that call in the cafe. Something unspoken tugged between us, but I couldn't name it. Didn't dare. We stayed like that for a while, sipping in silence. Every now and then, her gaze would lift, meet mine for a second too long, then drop. I kept imagining what my brother would say if he walked in, if he saw us sitting across from each other in the half-quiet house. The thought made me shift in my chair, but I didn't get up. She noticed. You look like you're about to run, she said softly. I trailed off. I don't want to make things weird. Her laugh was small, dry. Things are already weird. I should have laughed too, but I didn't. I just watched the way she cradled her mug in both hands, like it was holding her together. You remind me of someone, she said suddenly. Who? Myself, she answered, surprising me. At your age. Always holding back, thinking too much. Afraid to move. The words sank in slowly. I didn't know how to respond, so I said nothing. Just folded the corner of a napkin into smaller and smaller pieces, the way I had in the cafe. Her eyes followed the motion. And then, without thinking, or maybe with too much thinking, I set the folded piece down and slid it across the table. Just a scrap of paper napkin, meaningless on its own. But when she placed her hand over it, her fingers brushing mine for a heartbeat, it felt like the air tilted. It could have been nothing. A casual touch. A gesture with no weight. But I knew better. And I think she did too. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing remarkable, except that it was raining hard enough to blur the streetlights, and I was late getting home. Her car was already in the driveway. I jogged inside, shoes squeaking against the floor. She was in the living room, a book half open on her lap, though she wasn't reading. She looked up when I came in, and for a second it felt like she'd been waiting. What out there? She asked. Yeah. I shook out my jacket. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, something subtle, floral, but not sweet. I tried not to notice. She closed the book, set it aside. Hungry. I shrugged. My brother was working late again. The house felt too big for just the two of us. I sat on the far end of the couch, the kind of distance that was supposed to mean something. Safe. But the cushions still shifted slightly toward her. We talked about nothing. Weather, traffic, the new neighbors who parked wrong. Small things. Still, every silence between words grew heavier, stretching until it was almost easier not to speak at all. At one point, she reached over for the remote. Her arm brushed mine, light as a breath, but enough to freeze me in place. She didn't move away immediately. Neither did I. The sound of the rain filled the room. I shouldn't, she started, then stopped. Her fingers lingered on the remote, as if she'd forgotten why she'd picked it up. What? I asked, too quietly. She shook her head. Never mind. The words hung there, incomplete. My pulse was louder than the rain. That's when the door rattled, someone knocking, quick and sharp. We both startled. She drew back instantly, sliding to her corner of the couch as though distance could erase what had almost happened. It was the neighbor, dropping off a misdelivered package. I answered, mumbled thanks, shut the door too quickly. When I turned back, she was standing now, book in her hands, avoiding my eyes. You should change. You'll catch cold, she said, her tone carefully ordinary. I went upstairs, but my steps slowed halfway. I heard her still in the living room, pacing maybe. A floorboard creaked. Then quiet again. Later that night, when I came back down, she was at the table with her tea. She didn't look up until I sat across from her. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Her lips parted, like she was about to say something. So did mine. Neither of us spoke. Instead, she reached for her mug, and her hand brushed mine where it rested on the table. The touch lingered, Too long for accident, too short to name. I thought she might lean in. I thought I might let her. But she didn't. And neither did I. The space between us held the weight of something unfinished. The evening air was cooler than I expected. I found her on the bench outside the apartment, legs crossed, jacket half-zipped, staring at nothing in particular. The sky had turned a dull gray, and the streetlights cast long, quiet shadows. "You're late," she said without looking at me. I got held up. I shifted my weight, unsure whether to sit beside her or leave the empty space between us intact. She glanced at me, a flicker of something sharp in her eyes. Annoyance? Relief? I couldn't tell. I saw him today," she said. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the wind. "Your brother?" She nodded. "He was asking about you. About classes, work, things you usually tell him." I wanted to laugh, to make light of it, but the sound stuck in my throat. Instead, I focused on the way her hands twisted the edge of her jacket, over and over. I didn't tell him about us," she added. "Us." The word caught me off guard, though I shouldn't have expected otherwise. She turned slightly toward me, and for a moment, the rain glinting on the pavement behind her reflected in her eyes. Not that anything happened. Her words trailed, and I felt her weight shift, a small sigh escaping without really being a breath. I wanted to reach for her, to say the words I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, but the moment felt too fragile. Instead, I just said, "I'm here." She looked at me then, really looked, and I caught that flicker of something I couldn't name. Fear? Longing? Maybe both. "I don't want this to get messy," she whispered. "Messy?" I asked, my voice low, careful. "Yeah," she said, eyes dropping to the space between us. "I can't. I shouldn't." Her hands moved again, folding into each other like she was holding herself together. I leaned closer, though not too close. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I admitted. The words tasted heavier than I imagined. Her gaze flicked up, sharp, and she swallowed. "I don't want to hurt you either. Or myself." We sat in silence for a few moments, the world around us quiet except for distant traffic and the faint drizzle. I imagined her walking away, turning the corner, leaving me on the bench to replay everything in my head. And I didn't want that. "I think about it," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "About you. More than I should." Her eyes widened just a fraction, and then she looked down again. Her hand brushed the bench, tracing a line in the rain-spattered wood. "I think about you too," she confessed. The words were small, hesitant, as if admitting them aloud might shatter the ground beneath us. I swallowed. My chest tightened. "And what do we do with that?" She didn't answer. Her gaze went past me, somewhere I couldn't reach. A laugh, soft, dry, almost bitter, escaped her lips. "Do we just stop noticing each other?" she said finally. I thought about that. About walking away, about pretending everything was normal. But my hands itched to reach for hers, to stop her from disappearing into that space she'd carved for herself. Instead, I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. "Do you want to?" Her fingers twitched slightly. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. Just stared at the space between us, and I realized the tension wasn't in what we said. It was in what we didn't. The wind picked up, scattering a few leaves across the bench. We both watched them drift, uncertain where they'd land. And I sat there, wondering if the next move, hers or mine, would change everything. The days after that bench talk, everything shifted. She stopped staying in the kitchen when I came home. The seat I usually found warm and waiting for me at the table was empty. The mugs we had shared were washed and put away before I could reach for one. Even the little traces, the jacket tossed over the chair, the book left open on the counter, disappeared. I tried not to notice. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that she was busy or tired or had other things on her mind. But each day, the empty space between us felt louder. I texted once. A short, careful thing. "Coffee tomorrow?" No reply. I imagined her reading it and setting the phone down. Or maybe she never saw it. Either thought made my chest tighten. By Thursday, I was starting to doubt myself. Maybe I had imagined her interest. Maybe I had read signals that weren't there. I kept replaying the bench, the way her hand had brushed mine, the faint admission she had made. My own voice whispered in my head, "Maybe you're just too eager." Then I saw her at the grocery store. She was with a small boy, maybe 6 or 7, tugging at her sleeve as she navigated the aisles. My stomach knotted. I'd never known she had a child. Never heard a word about it. She didn't see me. She moved with a careful rhythm, like she was protecting him and herself at once. I wanted to call out, to wave, to show that I had no intention of judgment, but I didn't. I just watched, hidden behind the end cap of the cereal aisle. Walking back to my apartment, my phone buzzed. I checked it, hoping. Nothing. Just the usual notifications from school. No message from her. I started imagining scenarios I didn't want to imagine. Was she married before my brother? Was she hiding something else too? My mind spun, a carousel of questions I didn't dare voice. That evening, I went over to her apartment anyway. Quiet, deliberate. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd notice me there, or maybe I wanted to confront myself. Her door was closed. No lights. I lingered in the hallway longer than I should have, hoping to hear movement inside. Nothing. I knocked once, twice, paused. Nothing. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in the hallway, but it was just that, a trace, not a presence. I wanted to leave a note. Something small, something that wouldn't pressure her, but would remind her I was still here. My hand hovered over the pen and paper. I wrote, "I hope you're okay." Then I folded it neatly, tucked it into my pocket, and walked away. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept expecting a call, a message, a sign that the thread hadn't completely snapped. But there was nothing. Only the memory of her hand brushing mine, her hesitant confession at the bench, and the sudden, strange absence that replaced it. Sometimes I replayed our small routines, the mugs, the folded napkins, the quiet silences in the kitchen, and felt the pulse of something unfinished. Other times, I stared at my phone, thumbs hovering over the screen, imagining the words I might type, then deleting them. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And so I sat in that pause, letting it stretch over the empty seat at the table, over the quiet of her apartment, over the small gap between what was and what could have been. The day ended, and the cup of tea I had made for myself went cold. The note remained folded in my pocket. The bench outside was empty. Everything was there, just waiting. I found her in the kitchen, late afternoon light falling across the counter. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and damp laundry. She was stirring something in a mug, careful, slow, as if the motion itself kept her grounded. I hesitated at the doorway. My hands itched to reach out, to break the distance, but I froze. The empty days since the grocery store had built a wall between us, one neither of us had acknowledged. "You're here," she said softly, not looking up. I came to. I don't know. My voice trailed. I stepped closer, slowly, careful not to crowd her. "To see you, I guess." She didn't respond immediately. Her hands continued their small dance around the mug, twisting it, lifting it, setting it back down. I watched her fingers, the way they curved, tense, then relaxed. I wasn't sure if I should. I stopped. Words failed me. "Good," she said finally. One corner of her mouth lifted, almost a smirk. Because I wasn't either. We sat at the counter, a careful distance between us. Neither spoke for a long time. I traced the rim of my own mug with a finger, imagining the warmth flowing into my hand. She did the same with hers. "I thought about you," I said eventually. Not a confession, just a fact. Quiet, simple. Her gaze lifted then. Sharp, fleeting. "I know," she said. We didn't clarify. We didn't need to. The weight of the unsaid hung between us, heavier than any declaration could have been. "I don't want this to ruin everything," she added. Her voice was low, almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the fridge and the distant street noise. "I don't either," I admitted. "But I can't stop noticing." Her eyes softened, and she let out a small breath, like she had been holding it for weeks. "I notice you too." The words were simple, almost mundane, yet they carried everything we hadn't said for weeks. The bench, the brushes of hands, the folded napkin, the empty seat, the sudden absences. "I don't know what we do with this," I said. She tilted her head, studying me like she might find the answer in my expression. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I don't know." I reached toward her hand, tentative, not sure if it was too much, too soon. My fingers hovered above hers, then touched, softly. A light, deliberate connection. She didn't pull away, didn't squeeze. Just let me rest my hand on hers. The warmth was small, but it was enough. For a moment, the apartment felt like a safe place, even if the world outside remained complicated. We weren't speaking of futures or consequences or what might happen next. Just presence. I'm glad you came, she said quietly. Me too, I replied. Silence stretched, but it was different now. Less tension, more a quiet acknowledgement. A shared understanding. We both knew the risks, both knew the things that could go wrong. But for once, we let ourselves exist in the same space without pretending. Her lips curved in a brief, real smile. Nothing grand, nothing cinematic. Just her. Just that. I returned it with the smallest lift of my own lips. Her fingers twitched, brushing mine once again. A gentle, human touch. Enough to say I see you without words. Okay, she murmured. Not a promise, not an agreement. Just a simple, soft acknowledgement. I nodded, letting my hand fall back naturally. The moment didn't solve everything. It didn't erase the past, the complications, or the boundaries we had to navigate. But it was real. And it was ours, quiet as it was. For the first time in days, I felt a strange sort of peace, fragile but present. And for now, that was enough. Weeks passed like a slow current. The rain still came and went, but the apartment no longer felt like a stage for missed opportunities. It smelled of coffee, faint cinnamon, and the quiet hum of everyday life. I found her in the kitchen one morning at exactly 8:47 a.m., as if the universe, or maybe just habit, had orchestrated it. She was folding a towel, the same way she had months ago when I first noticed her hands, and the sunlight caught her hair in strands of gold. Black coffee, she asked, without looking up. Please, I said, smiling despite myself. We sat at the counter, our mugs steaming, fingers brushing now and then in tiny, deliberate gestures. Nothing rushed, nothing shouted. Just presence. Sometimes we went for walks, the bench outside still our quiet landmark. It wasn't dramatic. We didn't need it to be. We'd sit, side by side, sometimes sharing words, sometimes letting the silence speak. The past, the pauses, the unsent notes, the half-confessions, hovered like a gentle shadow. We didn't need to chase it away. She told me about her boy occasionally, enough to let me understand, not enough to feel intrusive. I shared small victories from school, small defeats too, and she listened with that same quiet attention that had drawn me in from the beginning. Evenings brought tea. She had developed a habit of setting 2 mugs out, a small ritual that became ours. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. I'd watch her stir, trace the rim of my mug, fold a napkin into a tiny shape just for amusement. And she'd notice, always, even if she pretended not to. The apartment didn't feel like a fragile truce anymore. It felt lived in, warm, unhurried. There were moments when I thought about the bench, the note tucked in my pocket, the empty seat, the almost kisses. They didn't sting anymore. They were threads woven into the tapestry of what had become something quietly real. One afternoon, as she leaned against the counter, spooning sugar into her tea, I caught her watching me the way she always had, careful, observant, gentle. And in that glance, I recognized all the months of tension, longing, and restraint. Remember that Tuesday, I said, almost on a whim, when the rain wouldn't stop? She smiled faintly. How could I forget? I gestured toward the bench outside. She cut me off with a shake of her head, but it wasn't a denial, just a quiet acknowledgement. We both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries relief and memory in the same breath. Later, as I washed my mug, she reached over, resting a hand briefly against my back. Not dramatic, not declared, just grounding. And I realized that this small, human, earned connection was enough. We had arrived here slowly, carefully. No sudden confessions, no cinematic declarations. Just mornings at 8:47, shared tea, black coffee, the bench, small touches, tiny glances. And it was enough. I thought about everything that had led us here, the missteps, the pauses, the distance. and I realized I didn't miss the almost moments anymore, because they had shaped the reality we had now. As she stirred her tea, looking at me with that quiet, familiar intensity, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. Not perfection, just life lived together. Warm, honest, and quietly full. I reached over and flicked the napkin she had folded for me earlier into a tiny triangle on the counter. She noticed and smirked. I didn't need words. She understood. And in that small, shared glance, the world outside could spin or stall. It didn't matter. We had our rhythm now, earned, simple, ours.